Good morning and welcome to What's Next If Roe versus Wade Falls, sponsored by the Heilbronn Department of Population and Family Health and the Office of Education of the Mailman School of Public Health. My name is Sandy Bernal Garcia and I'm the Associate Dean for Student Affairs and Dean of Students at Mailman. I welcome you today to participate in what will undoubtedly be a critical discussion. Given the recent leaked documents that confirm our suspicions about the decision to overturn Roe, we now need to focus on what we can do in the aftermath of this impending decision. Today, we will hear from distinguished faculty and leaders about the national and global implications of a possible reversal of Roe versus Wade and what the public health community can do to guard reproductive rights. There will be an opportunity for Q&A as our plan is to wrap up the discussion around 10:45 and turn to your questions. Please type in the Q&A window and our panelists will answer later in the session. It is my pleasure to introduce our three panelists for today. Dr. Linda Fried, Dean of the Mailman School of Public Health and Delamar Professor of Public Health. Dr. Fried has been Dean of Columbia University's Mailman School of Public Health since 2008. Under her leadership, the school has built programs to address the critical issues of our century that affect the public's health. From pandemic preparedness to the health effects of climate change, to increasing health span for our society of longer lives. Dr. Fried is a leader in the fields of epidemiology and geriatric medicine. Her seminal research has defined frailty as a new clinical syndrome and illuminated its causes. The recipient of numerous honors, she recently received the Kober Medal for the Association of American Physicians and was named to City and State Magazine's 2021 Health Power list of individuals leading New York through the coronavirus crisis. Joining Dean Fried will be two prominent leaders in women's health and reproductive rights, Professor Terry McGovern and Dr. Golene Samari. Terry McGovern is Chair and Professor of the Heilbronn Department of Population and Family Health and Director of the Program on Global Health Justice and Governance. Professor McGovern has published research on how reductions in federal funding for sexual and reproductive health services compound other socioeconomic and political trends that impact health equity and health outcomes in already marginalized communities, making her uniquely qualified to speak about the state of abortion in the United States and the repercussions of overturning Roe versus Wade. Recently, she organized a letter to the Supreme Court signed by 25 deans of schools of public health and over 1,000 public health leaders across the country. The letter calls on the Supreme Court to uphold Roe versus Wade and affirm the constitutional right to abortion as a critical aspect of public health. We will also hear from Dr. Golene Samari, Assistant Professor in the Heilbronn Department of Population and Family Health. Dr. Samari is a public health demographer whose research focuses on social inequities and population and reproductive health. She examines how racism, gender inequities, and migration-based inequities shape population and reproductive health, both domestically and globally, with a particular focus on communities in or from the Middle East and North Africa. In 2020, she was named a changemaker in family planning by the Society of Family Planning for her work at the intersection of migration and sexual and reproductive health and rights. Her ongoing work focuses on structural racism in immigrant communities' sexual and reproductive health. Dr. Samari's work is widely published and she has received a few notable honors for her early career contributions to health equity research. Please join me in welcoming our distinguished panelists. And now I will turn it over to Dean Fried.
Good morning, and thank you for joining us today for this really critical discussion. I want to particularly thank Terry McGovern and Golene Samari for your leadership, your sustained, important, and effective leadership on women's reproductive rights and health, and for this discussion that you will lead today. We're here today to consider the implications of the anticipated Supreme Court decision to overturn 49 years of decisions and legal precedent that gave women the right to make personal decisions about their own reproduction. Decisions that are never easy, but where the possibility of safe legal abortion enables better health outcomes than the alternatives. Now, despite overwhelming evidence that access to legal, safe abortion services saves lives, in recent years, policymakers opposed to women's autonomy or their own reproductive decision-making have pushed laws and regulations restricting or banning abortion. And last week, of course, we're here in response to a draft Supreme Court majority opinion that indicated that the court will overturn Roe v. Wade, ending women's constitutional right to abortion. I would like to provide some opening comments on the health implications of ending the right of a woman to obtain an abortion when she judges it necessary. As public health professionals, we know that this ruling will have serious public health consequences, including jeopardizing the sexual and reproductive health of millions and putting individuals' physical and mental health at risk, as well as their families' well-being. Millions of Americans know this and support the right to safe, effective legal abortion, which is an essential component of patient-centered healthcare for women. Polls across a variety of sources, AP, Pew, CNN, many others, consistently show that at least 2/3 of Americans support the court's decision in Roe v. Wade and oppose overturning it. Denying any person who makes the decision to choose an abortion deprives women of equal rights to control their own bodies and puts women's health and well-being at greater risk. It also undermines the ability of families to pursue higher education and amplifies forces that keep people in poverty. Evidence shows us that removing access to legal abortion will set the US even further back on maternal health outcomes and will exacerbate health disparities. We know as well that over millennia, women who fear that maintaining a pregnancy will jeopardize their health, well-being, or the future of their families have chosen abortion even when it is not safe and legal, jeopardizing putting their own health and survival at huge risk in the face of unsafe and illegal abortions. And these will continue. They will amplify in the face of such a ruling that is anticipated. The US already has the highest maternal mortality rate of comparable countries, double the rate of most high-income countries. The mortality rate associated with childbirth in the US is 14 times higher than that of legal induced abortion. 14 times higher than that of legal induced abortion. Banning abortion in the US, banning safe legal abortion in the US could lead to a 21% increase in pregnancy-related deaths. In addition, and particularly, women of color and uninsured women are significantly less likely to have access to sexual and reproductive health services than white women and privately insured women. And related to that, Black women, we know, experience more maternal health complications than white women, are twice as likely to experience a life-threatening complication of pregnancy or delivery, and are nearly 3 times more likely to die from pregnancy-related causes. So this ruling, which makes unsafe, illegal abortions the necessary option for many, or no abortion, and at a time when mortality rates from pregnancy are so high, is cruel. It is additionally cruel that reversing Roe will also put women and girls who experience physical and sexual violence and assault at further risk, deprived of the ability to terminate a pregnancy resulting from this violence. We also know that abuse can increase a person's risk for an unintended pregnancy, just as unintended pregnancy can put a person at greater risk of abuse. To make matters worse, women who are denied abortions are more likely to have ongoing contact with a violent partner. These outcomes affect all women. They will be the worst, of course, for women of color and women living in poverty. But all women are put at additional and unnecessary risk in this deprivation of the right to make personal decisions for their own future. With that public health frame and background, it is my honor to turn the discussion now over to the Honorable Terry McGovern, who will discuss the legal ramifications of this potential Supreme Court decision. Thank you, Terry.
Thank you so much, Dean Freed. I just want to appreciate your leadership here. This is the Washington Post ad, which 25 deans signed because Dean Freed reached out to them. I think it's being used all around the country for evidence. I know that this conversation is about what can we do, and there is so much we can do. And I think that ad is a prime example of public health leaders stepping up and saying, no, what you are about to do, SCOTUS, is going to harm public health. So thank you for your leadership, Dean Freed. I want to talk a bit about what is going to happen when Roe is issued, when the actual decision is issued. I really appreciate all of Dean Freed's remarks and remind everyone to think about that person who is pregnant, who needs to have an abortion. And this is, in fact, extremely cruel, what I'm about to describe. There are 21 states that have trigger bans, laws, or constitutional amendments in place that make it very likely they will ban abortion immediately after Roe is repealed. There are numerous states that have recently passed restrictive abortion regulations. A reversal of Roe is predicted to increase average travel distance to the nearest abortion facility by 249 miles for residents of affected counties. Obviously, those are for people who have the means to travel. Data from multiple studies, including the WHO, suggests that experiencing unwanted pregnancies still seek abortion, even in highly punitive legal situations. That's why all that data the dean was talking about is so important here. We know that criminalizing abortion doesn't stop it, it just makes it less safe. The rate of unsafe abortions is 4 times higher in countries with restrictive abortion laws than countries where abortion is legal. So medication abortion is something that we were all looking to. It's currently approved for up to 10 weeks, for use to up to 10 weeks in pregnancy. It's a 2-pill regimen taken 1 or 2 days apart. The FDA lifted restrictions on mail order abortion pills in December, but access to these pills is heavily dependent on where you live. Between January and May 2022, 116 medication abortion restrictions have been introduced in 22 states, enacted in 16. 32 states require a physician to administer the medication. 19 states require the physician to be present. Texas and Indiana already ban abortion pills at 7 and 10 weeks. 8 states have total bans on abortions. So out-of-state providers will not be able to circumvent these laws by providing abortion pills via telemedicine because they're required to follow the laws of the state where the patient is located. Tennessee criminalized recently the distribution of abortion pills by anyone except the physician in person. We're already seeing the impact of new laws that seek to criminalize abortion. Just to say, many of these laws are actually kind of bounty hunting laws based on the fugitive slave laws, where they're actually incentivizing people reporting anyone who assists a person trying to get an abortion. We're seeing the redefinition of personhood in states to include unborn children, which is opening the floodgates for people to be arrested for having abortions and miscarriages. Arkansas, Kentucky, Mississippi have opened criminal liability for offenses like child abuse, homicide, feticide. When trigger bans or heartbeat bills go into effect, there will be a whole new wave of arrests potentially. By the way, Louisiana just introduced legislation that classifies abortion as a homicide, and one politician is calling for the death penalty for anyone who has an abortion. Before I talk about the opinion, I want to talk about the total fiction around what is happening to children who are born to people that didn't want to have them. So in the SCOTUS argument, Justice Barrett made it sound like there's no issue anymore. You know, the women can just go to 9 months, we can terminate their parental rights, and the children will be dropped off and taken care of in safe havens or in various foster care systems. So just want to point out that these systems are rife with child abuse, neglect, and racism. Racial disparities occur at nearly every major decision-making point in the child welfare continuum. That's according to the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services. Black and Native American children are overrepresented in foster care. I could go on and on about the bad outcomes. Most painfully, Mississippi, leading the fight to repeal Roe, has a vicious history of abuse, neglect, and death in its child welfare system. There's a case pending since 2004 around the severely malnourished 22-pound 3-year-old who received no medical attention during her 3 months and 5 home placements in Mississippi's Division of Family and Children's Services. Mississippi has implemented only 37 of 113 court-mandated reforms. They recently slashed their budget for services for mothers. So when we talk about cruelty, we should also be talking about fiction, because a lot of what has been discussed at the Supreme Court level is fiction. We see in Texas, in most of the states, they've put no resources in maternal child health, have made it more difficult for people to access contraception and sexual and reproductive health services, and yet they are perfectly confident saying things like, there's no issue, the baby can just be dropped off. A bit on the opinion. So Roe, the right to contraception, LGBTQ rights, have all been found for many, many years to exist in the penumbra of rights deeply rooted in our nation's history and tradition, implicit in the concept of liberty. And different opinions talk about the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. Others talk about specific rights. Basically, Judge Alito throws all of this out. He says, first of all, beginning with precedent, he says stare decisis, which is something I learned in law school was paramount and central to our legal system. It can be completely tossed because Roe was an egregious abuse of judicial authority, and again invokes Plessy v. Ferguson, the case that said separate but equal was okay. They seem to really enjoy taking the most absurd comparison and making it. He also basically recites all of these 17th century English treatises, all of these kind of sources of law that criminalized abortion that are chilling. They also authorized burning women at the stake. They authorized all kinds of things. So what are we talking about when we talk about going back to history? Who is Judge Alito? So for over 15 years, he's proven himself a consistent conservative voice on the court. He has regularly ruled against civil rights and civil liberties claims. He wrote the sole dissent in Planned Parenthood versus Casey. He consistently argues for tighter standards for plaintiffs seeking trial on race, gender, and disability claims. He wrote The Dissent in Obergefell versus Hodges. But, you know, what's so incredible is he ends up saying it should be left to the voters at the state level and women have rights. And he has consistently voted against voting rights. So I guess I would just want to keep making the point that this is really irrational where we are. His conclusion is the inescapable conclusion is that a right to abortion is not deeply rooted in the nation's history and traditions. On the contrary, there is an unbroken tradition of prohibiting abortion. And again, he cites all these very old treatises for this. I think that you know, unfortunately, although it's a draft opinion, we can expect that Roe will be totally overruled. This opinion is a maximalist opinion. It's kind of the worst possible scenario. He says there is no constitutional right to seek an abortion at any stage, in any pregnancy, or for any reason. So we didn't actually necessarily expect that they would go this far. It is an unconscionable rollback of fundamental rights for people in the US. And I will just quickly point out that many of the states do not have exceptions for rape and incest. And of course, we're often talking about adolescents. So the ramifications of this are just incredible. I want to, before I hand it over to Professor Samari, I want to just say, for public health people, there is so much we can do. Golene's going to go into all kinds of details, but I really think now is the time for us to really respond and plan how we are going to both help people continue to get access to the services, sexual and reproductive health services they need, but also kind of use our scholarship to really expose what is going to happen. And I will say that in terms of legal issues, there's a lot of them. Why isn't HIPAA covering crisis pregnancy centers? How can we have laws prosecuting people in different states? So there's a million different ways that public health people can actually help with the policy change that is going to be required after Roe is reversed. And I'll end there and pass it over to my esteemed colleague, Professor Samari.
Thank you so much. Thank you for that great overview. So I am going to get into some action items that public health students and professionals can really take in this space. I mean, there's endless amounts of work right now. But first, I want to set a little bit of context. I think it's really important to think about who the people are that typically get abortions. So 60% of those who get abortions are already mothers. 58% have not had a previous abortion. 49% are below the poverty level. 41% have attended some college. Majority are not married. 30% are in their late 20s. 43% are in their first trimester. And 68% live in a blue state. So we already see this distribution towards blue states and states that really protect abortion access versus states that already try to criminalize abortion access, because Roe is really the floor. It's not the ceiling and the end all be all of abortion access and it's falling. It's really the floor of providing access for birthing people in all their pregnancy options. And so nearly 90% of US counties actually lack an abortion clinic. And multiple states in the South and Midwest really rely on doctors from out of state. So that really limits the number of abortions the clinic can provide. 5 states, including Mississippi, the origins of the Dobbs case, North Dakota and West Virginia, only have 1 clinic left. And we know the impacts. When people talk about post-Roe, we know what happens to women when they're denied an abortion. As Dean Fried explained, a lot of what we know comes from the work of Diana Green Foster in the Turnaway study, which I had the privilege of helping out with at the end of sort of the study, looking at the emotional trajectories of women who were really denied abortions. And we know things like there are clear health and social and economic implications for being forced to carry a pregnancy. We know there's worse physical health, there's reduced life aspirations, there's higher exposure to domestic violence, there's increased poverty, there's a lower chance of having a wanted pregnancy, and there's worse outcomes for the other children. And so there's many ways essentially that women are hurt by carrying an unwanted pregnancy to term. And basically, short of dying, women who are denied an abortion are more likely to have serious complications than women who received an abortion. There was a really interesting sort of thread by a physician in Alabama on Twitter, Dr. Leah Torres, about the fact that we kind of know what things will look like after Roe is overturned, because states like Alabama provide us with examples. So Alabama, for example, has the third highest maternal mortality rate in the country. Pregnant people die at a higher rate than the national average. A fifth of children don't know where their next meal will come from. Reproductive age people have the highest uninsured rate. There's a shortage of health professionals. Abortion is already a crime in the state constitution. If you're pregnant, it is a crime to use drugs. If you start a fight with somebody while you're pregnant and that person happens to shoot you and kill your fetus, you, the pregnant person, will be charged. And pregnancy outcomes are essentially criminalized if they result in anything but a live birth. So this creates a climate in which physicians are afraid to provide even miscarriage management for fear of being charged. I think it's also important to sort of emphasize how abortion criminalization is really layered in to the history of white supremacy. It's part of a long history of maintaining white supremacy through reproductive control of Black and marginalized communities. The original laws that criminalized abortion intended to, quite frankly, ensure that America remained a white nation. The first anti-abortion laws in the late 19th century actually made abortion illegal and criminalized midwives who were primarily Black and Indigenous. And they were providing majority of the reproductive health care, including abortion. So I think it's like a missed opportunity and lacks historical context if we don't think about how this is really tied into structural racism and the oppression of Black, Brown, Indigenous, and people of color. We know because of the great work of Amanda Stevenson that when the Supreme Court overturns or guts Roe and there's a nationwide ban on abortion, there would be an estimated 21% increase in the number of pregnancy-related deaths overall. But this is actually a 33% increase among Black pregnant people because there are higher risks in pregnancy compared to abortion. So there's been a lot of discussion about how there's going to be movement to states with abortion access, and that's going to be kind of what the landscape looks like. And so states like New York, which are moving to protect access to abortion, are going to receive an influx of patients seeking abortion. And so there's about 8 coastal states to expand access. It includes California, Connecticut, Hawaii, New Jersey, New York, Oregon, Washington, and Vermont, along with Washington, D.C. Abortion access will be upheld in at least 12 additional states. So that leaves just about 5 states that are neither sort of sanctuary nor primed to overturn abortion access. But in these states that aren't expected to ban abortion and are expected to sort of either stay neutral or protect abortion, there's actually, these are not necessarily the answer to Roe being overturned. There's laws that limit, for example, which medical providers may provide abortion. There's laws on the books in these places that prevent abortion after a certain point in pregnancy, as well as health insurance policies that won't cover abortion, as well as parent involvement laws that require adolescents to get parental consent or request a judicial bypass in order to obtain an abortion. And all of these things prevent access and to abortion in states that are moving to protect abortion access. And so I think that's something as public health people that we need to take very seriously. Professor McGovern touched on the fact that the next battle is really self-managed medication abortion. We know it's extremely safe. We know people are increasingly turning to self-managed abortion. Even the WHO recognizes the acceptability of self-managed abortion and its global abortion standards. We've already seen a 174% increase for some nonprofits that ship abortion pills to people's homes in the US after SB 8 went into effect in Texas. In a study that was led by Lauren Ralph and Dan Grossman of Answer and Advancing New Standards in Reproductive Health that I was involved with, we used current data and actually estimated that 1 in every 14 women will self-manage an abortion in their lifetime. I expect that these numbers will increase in sort of this new landscape. And in post-Roe America, really the distance to your nearest abortion provider will multiply substantially. And so you're going to have states like Connecticut and New York really likely to experience longer wait times. And so because of these longer wait times, people are going to self-manage abortion. And so the anti-abortion movement is now moving into the space of further criminalizing access to at-home medication abortion. And so you only have 3 states right now that ban any self-managed abortion. That's South Carolina, Oklahoma, and Nevada. But additionally, 17 states have legislation that's really vulnerable to misuse by anti-abortion prosecutors, such as fetal harm laws, medical licensing restrictions, and criminal bans. So if our congressional leaders can take any action at all, it would be ideal to see them really decriminalize at-home abortion, access to self-managed abortion. So where can public health leadership really take action? Many people on this call have probably heard of abortion funds. So it's important right now, before the final decision is issued, to really emphasize the fact that abortion is still legal in every state. And if clinics need to be found, there's search services like ineedna.com. I'll put some of these resources in the chat as well. There's abortion funds in every state that can be found at donationsforabortion.com. And abortion funds really provide practical and financial support to abortion seekers and have really done so for decades. KeepOurClinics.org funds are independent clinics which provide 2/3 of abortions in the United States. There's an organization called All Options, which provides support and pregnancy options counseling through their hotlines and financial support for abortion seekers, as well as practical support for things like diapers. I think it's important to emphasize the work of practical support groups. As public health people and practitioners, we have the skills to provide practical support, which help abortion seekers travel to different states for their procedures, provide abortion doula services, and other things. So there are specific practical support orgs like the Bridget Alliance and Midwest Access that really help abortion seekers travel to different states. I think it's important to stay on top of the training and information from the Digital Defense Fund. There's been a little bit of discussion on social media with regards to reproductive health apps and information privacy. And there's one called EUKI, which was actually created with privacy in mind. So if you're going to use a repro health app, that's the one that is recommended. It can't be emphasized enough how voting rights and fighting for voting rights was really the backbone of how we came to this day. And if you sort of don't understand how restricting voting rights have led to this day, you should really pay attention to your reproductive justice leaders who have been saying this for a long time, because you wouldn't have your anti-abortion representatives in government if certain communities' voting rights had not been oppressed and suppressed. The connecting folks to reproductive legal helplines is important, so as well as reproductive legal defense funds, especially as this movement towards criminalization of self-managed abortion continues. I also always like to encourage folks to donate to IW Rising, which is an initiative that includes financial and practical support for Indigenous abortion seekers in the US and Canada, as well as midwifery support. Anybody who's kind of going the self-managed abortion route or planning to take abortion pills at home can call or text the Reproductive Care Fund for information, support, and referrals. Jane's Due Process is a great organization for adolescents who are looking to get abortion without parental permission. There's an organization called the Abortion Squad, which combats abortion-related misinformation on Reddit and other places. And so there's plenty of places to get involved. There's plenty of places to donate to, as well as offer your skills and support to. There's legal funds to support. There's communication mechanisms to support. And really ending the criminalization of pregnancy, abortion, and all aspects of reproduction is essential to affirming the right to reproductive autonomy, which is the long-term goal. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Golene. Thank you, Professor Samari. So we have some questions. I do want to actually just add a couple of things to the what we can do list. I do really think that the question of HIPAA, when you think about criminalization, I was in a meeting with prosecutors who will be reliant on medical providers. Who's going to make the complaint? So HIPAA could really be our friend. Most states have actually enacted HIPAA, protections. Some go further than the federal law, but I think we ought to be thinking about how to strengthen HIPAA protections with an eye towards, making it much more difficult to criminalize. I think in addition, we have a question about Fight the Right, and I want to talk about that and have Professor Samari talk about it as well. But I think that we need to look closely. In many states, there's these crisis pregnancy centers where unsuspecting people are going and receiving, virtually untrue advice about their pregnancies. Those are not regulated by HIPAA, although they have started to move into provision of care. So lots of questions there. Lots of questions also about federal, whether the FDA gets to say how, medication abortion is regulated, or the states do. So in all of these issues, we of course need lawyers, but we need public health people. Prosecutors very much need our expertise in avoiding prosecuting some of these cases. So there's so much we can be doing that I think we just need to think creatively, and now is the moment for us to actually step forward and try to help as much as possible. I want to go to this question of, given that reversing Roe has been a 50-year enterprise by conservatives, what would a mid-long-term strategy to reverse this decision look like? And how can we get involved? So I'll begin, and then I'll turn to Professor Samari. I want to say that, first of all, if you're really looking at what's going to happen at the state level, since we're now seeing, the Supreme Court say there's no constitutional protection, it's up to the states. So prosecutors, judges, depending upon what the state is, they're elected, they're appointed, there's often people donating to their campaigns. We often see in environmental injustice issues that many of the elected officials or judges who are ruling on the cases have actually received big contributions from the industries that are involved. I would suggest that there's something very similar going on here. So if we're talking about Fight the Right and fight this comprehensive strategy that not only is going after abortion rights, trans children, voting rights, racial justice, we have to get much more comprehensive and sophisticated in how we look at what is going on and what the interconnections are. We cannot ignore. We need to look at what these judges are saying. We need to hold it up. We need to start being as comprehensive as the right wing is in making connections in all of these issues in the ways that we've been talking about them today. It's all connected. So I think we have a lot of work to do, including really capturing what is going to be unleashed with this bounty hunting stuff, with the criminalization, the harm that people are experiencing. But I think also working together, the resistance that has been unleashed around this country is absolutely amazing. So we need to make sure that we are helping in every way possible to strengthen that resistance as public health people. But over to you, Dr. Samari, on your thoughts on the right wing. And next.
So I think the biggest mistake that the abortion movement can make is assuming that their work is done if the floor or the low bar that is Roe falls. Because if you kind of listen to the anti-abortion groups, their next steps are to move into states where abortion will be protected and get in the way of women from or birthing people from their states who are traveling for abortion, and sort of redirecting those folks to crisis pregnancy centers. There's also going to be effort to expand the numbers of crisis pregnancy centers. I mean, there's some states where you look at and there's, 50 crisis pregnancy centers and one abortion providing clinic or center. And so this is really, that's where the misinformation begins, and that's where access is prevented. And so we really need to be mindful of their strategy as well, which is going to be to continue to obstruct and get in the way at all costs in places where abortion will be protected. And so as access is further constrained from the point where it's at now, and it's going to really fall on a handful of states, or the 25 states that we anticipate abortion access being preserved, we need to also be thinking about how to really protect access to abortion in those states, expand access to abortion. The other reasons I mentioned, the regulations over abortion timing in those places, the lack of insurance coverage for abortion, the lack of adolescent access to abortion and things like that, also all those things do is push birthing people towards later term abortions. And so we really need to think about revisions for those policies and raising the bar for how we provide comprehensive abortion access.
Okay, thank you. I see a few legal questions which I'll try to respond to. One is the precedent of overturning Roe sets for Griswold, which is of course the contraception case, Obergefell v. Hodges, Lawrence v. Texas, so that would be LGBTQI rights and gay marriage. So basically, and somebody also asked, do I see any holes in the opinion or ways to fight it? As far as I'm concerned, that the opinion is just full of misinformation and fallacy, right? So, but it is the Supreme Court of the United States, and they have a majority voting on that opinion. So whether they now go, basically this decision that was leaked completely opens the door to anything that is based on this kind of penumbra set of rights, the right to privacy. Justice Alito in the decision says Roe is different because it's so egregiously wrongly decided, and because of all of this, in my view, inaccurate citation. But in fact, what the decision does is it widely opens the door to go down this line of what was originally in the Constitution. And if there is no kind of liberty right that protects any of this, I would say all of this is at risk. It's going to be about the appetite of the other justices to join a majority on these issues. But he has set up a way to do this in this decision. I think, so are there ways to combat this ruling? Obviously, it's a total sum game of how many justices are going to support it at this point. So there are a million legal arguments to be made that completely refute the history and the way he has written this decision. But it is essentially now a politicized process. So I'm not sure with this Supreme Court how that's going to happen. I think so it's all about bodily autonomy. So there's a complete line between all of these issues. And again, we'll see how far they're willing to go with it. Another point about gerrymandering and the general erosion of our voting rights, is there a way to ever get back to abortion being legal federally or otherwise? Look, all around the world, we've seen horrible situations unfold where people, women, girls have been harmed, died because of illegal abortion, because being refused services when they weren't even having an abortion. And those situations have galvanized countries and activism and policymakers. So I think we don't know if there's a way. I believe there's always a way. But we have a lot of work to do to make sure that the harm is being documented, and at the same time that we're also helping to avoid harm. So I wouldn't say there's no way we can ever get back in the US to abortion being legal, because I think, unfortunately, we're going to see a whole lot of tragic outcomes. And I'm not quite willing to give up on the voting people, or the people who have the privilege of voting in this country, to not care about that. So, Professor Samari?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I think you said it well.
Okay. So there's a question about why is it that abortion ended up being in clinics rather than comprehensive OB care at doctors' offices and hospitals. Go ahead, Professor Samari.
So I think that this is because Terry, Professor McGovern, I'd be interested in your take on this as well. But my perspective on this is that the anti-abortion movement also reaches providers. And so particularly in states like Mississippi and Alabama, not all OBGYN practices are providing comprehensive pregnancy care, which includes abortion access. And so you have providers that go to specific clinics to provide that care in places where abortion access is already criminalized and restricted.
I agree. I mean, unfortunately, I can't help, we've had a lot of research, which Professor Samari has been a part of the damage when the Trump administration attached to Title X, which was the kind of comprehensive federal funding stream for sexual and reproductive health services, which was put there to avoid unintended pregnancy, to improve health outcomes. The Trump administration put a gag rule on it. Nobody receiving the funding could in any way even do abortion, refer. And this further skewed and harmed the ability of people to access sexual and reproductive health services, right? And then you couple that with all of the other impositions and restrictions if you were undocumented, et cetera. So we're talking about a context already where essentially abortion has skewed healthcare. The devotion of the right wing to absolutely taking away anybody's right to actually make that decision has so distorted healthcare at the state level. So I would say everything having to do with abortion care has everything to do with this history of kind of hunting down and refusing to acknowledge that abortion providers are providing just basic health care. So,
Yeah, and the religious right argument about that restricts access to abortion, I think for physicians is actually quite problematic if they employ that in their practice in the way that they practice medicine, because what goes to say that they're not making that choice for birthing people in other dimensions of their health and well-being? Like, where do you draw the line for where that choice is being made if you're not offering comprehensive healthcare, which includes abortion?
absolutely, absolutely. There's a question about, or there's a comment. I'm a GYN oncologist and have long been fascinated on the parallels between abortion rights restrictions and end of life restrictions. It might be interested to bring the burgeoning palliative care medical specialty and concepts into this arena. And then the person is saying that we've learned through COVID, scientific data doesn't carry the weight that one thinks it should. Of course, this is all, I agree completely. I think, there's just contradictions all over the place. I mean, I have to say that in the SCOTUS argument, Justice Barrett basically said, we can just force the women to go to term, go to 6 weeks more or something, she said. And we terminate their parental rights, and it's really not more of a bodily intrusion than, say, a vaccine. So I want to just say that all of these concepts are being played with in the most obscene ways. We've seen over and over again the right wing use human rights language to justify all kinds of stuff. So I just think this issue of contradictions around some of these folks' approaches to issues can't be amplified enough. I guess we have about 8 minutes, and I'm seeing if there's any other questions here. So what other actions should be taken by our legislature to combat this now that the women's health legislation has failed? And I think that's a question about the federal law that failed yesterday. Dr. Samari.
I mean, I think that they can take congressional action to protect access to medication abortion and self-managed abortion, because that's where the fight is going to go. Because right now you can, in all but essentially 3 places, you can get access to medication abortion and self-managed abortion, which is very safe. WHO agrees that it's very safe. So I think that if our congressional leaders could at least protect that.
Yes, so I think absolutely. I do think that this brings us back to the importance of voting as a piece of this, because whether it's the FDA, whether we're talking about the Fed strengthening HIPAA regulations, it has a lot to do with who's in the White House. So remember that we need to pay attention to that, because with different leadership, there may not be the appetite to protect medication abortion or keep HIPAA as strong as it is. So we can't lose that. We have to continue to think about that. There's a question about how has education of contraception, IUDs, improved over the years. Abortions have declined in recent past. Is there a way to make sure that contraception is more prevalent and we continue to reduce the numbers of unwanted pregnancies?
So I think comprehensive reproductive health care will always include both contraception and abortion. I think that declines in abortion are hard to attribute to one thing or another, and could be data collection issues. Always, abortion will happen no matter how much contraception is available. So let me just say it like that. And we're not looking at the whole picture if we don't think that this fight is going to move towards restriction of contraception, like Plan B, like IUDs and long-acting methods. So yeah, I'm not sure if that particularly answers the question, but I think of both as really pillars of comprehensive healthcare and reproductive healthcare for pregnant and birthing people.
So there's a question, thank you. There's a question about whether a Supreme Court justice can be impeached. They can. There was in 1804 a judge was impeached and acquitted. Obviously, that is going to depend on the appetite of the court itself, et cetera. So so the answer is yes. My instinct is unlikely in this particular instance, but yes. We have only 5 minutes left, so I wanted to ask Dr. Samari and maybe comment myself on the points of light in all of this. So I think we've all been feeling like we've woken up in a dystopian nightmare. And despite our reproductive justice leaders reminding us that abortion has been illegal in many places, essentially, for a long time, we still are in this moment where we have this unbelievable decision that is so deeply disrespectful to bodily autonomy. So how do we make our way out of this moment? How do we go forward? Big question, Professor Samari, but I'll answer it too.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to circle back to the point you just made, really about voting rights and how our reproductive justice leaders have really been telling us for forever that this is where we were going to end up. And part of that was chipping away at voting rights. And so I would be really encouraged to see a lot of people in the movement for comprehensive healthcare to really be pushing for voting rights and making that a priority issue, because I don't think that we get comprehensive care that includes access to abortion until we fix that issue. And so it gives me a little bit of hope to see people mobilized right now and willing to take action right now. I would like to see it sustained. I would like to see continued ongoing effort in this area, because we need a lot of boots on the ground.
So thank you so much. And I don't know if Dean Freed would like to make some closing comments, but I will say that we're seeing our students organizing civil disobedience, organizing, projecting pro-abortionist healthcare messages onto Columbia University Library. We're seeing people all around the country really mobilizing and doubling down on their commitment to make sure that no one is harmed. I think also, I would say, I think we're having to get much more strategic and make connections differently. And all of these are very positive signs. I also think the fact that Dean Freed and other deans were willing to step forward on this, these are all incredibly positive, important signs. And I think ultimately, there's way too many people who will not tolerate us going backwards. So how that plays out is kind of up to us. Over to you, Dean Freed.
Well, thank you both so very much for all of your discussion today and all of your actions. I'm in your debt, and we all are. I would just conclude not by repeating anything you said, because you said it so well and powerfully, but just to remind us that the National Academy of Medicine definition of public health is the science-based actions we must take collectively to ensure the health of the public. COVID showed us so painfully that health and the economy are not separable. What we've been discussing here today shows us yet again that health and human rights are not separable. And I think that we need to act at the intersection of both the core responsibilities of public health for actions we must take collectively to protect the health of the public and the ways we have to fight for the human rights of individuals and their autonomy to make decisions about their own health and well-being. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Dean
Thank
Freed.
you.
Bye. Bye, everyone. Thank you for attending.
Bye.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
everyone, and thank you to our panelists for all the insight, the knowledge, the next steps, and the glimmers of hope. Thank you so very much. And this session was recorded and will be available on the website after today. Thank you again.
Thank you.